Welcome to our February Bright Family Engagement Learning Session. We're so very glad you're here with us today, and thank you for logging on. Either you're watching us live or you're watching this live stream later. So thank you very much. Welcome. You're going to hear in a moment the introduction to our special guest tonight, Monifa. But in the meantime, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Megan Harding. And this is my teammate, Julie Patton, right here. And Julie and I are two of the four family engagement coordinators for Bright. And we have two teammates who had things come up today and aren't here, but Lakeisha and Victor are also central part of our team. And for those of you that are watching that are new to Bright, Bright transforms how schools support students and families who've experienced a mental health disruption. So the meat and potatoes of what we do is we have a school-based intervention, a tier 3 intervention in schools all across. And if you are watching this and your school doesn't have a Bright and you're interested, let us know. But we're here every month to provide this, what we call the Parent Learning Series. And this is just an opportunity to hear from uh, folks in the community, parents and folks in the community about topics that parents have identified they were interested in learning and talking more about. So we really want to connect with you, parents, in as many ways as we can. So one way we do it is through these monthly learning sessions with these new topics each month. And the other thing we do is we have two what we call parent conversations a month, and those are on Zoom. And those happen on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And the second Tuesday is open to all parents. And the fourth Tuesday is a BIPOC affinity space for parents. And those are just open spaces to have informal connection, to talk about things that are coming up for you as a parent. And so feel free to join us. We can support each other. We can really focus on if there's something kind of big that's happening with you at that time, and we can be really flexible, brainstorm, support, whatever is needed at that time, even hoping to trying to untangle sticky situations that sometimes come up for us as parents. So lots of ways to connect, and we're so glad you're here. And I'm going to pass it to my friend Julie, who is going to introduce Monifa.
Thanks, Megan. Tonight, we have Monifa Robinson, who is the CEO of Within Your Reach Consulting Services, where she is passionate about nurturing the personal and spiritual growth of women around the world. Through thoughtful counseling and coaching, she supports women in creating healthier, happier, and more abundant lives. Monifa is a published author and holds professional licensure in multiple states. With experience across a variety of clinical settings, Munifa also serves as an adjunct professor for the University of Denver, UMass, Global, and Smith College, where she enjoys mentoring and educating future helping professionals. Munifa, thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Megan. I'm really excited to be here, especially to talk about this particular topic. So, thank you so much for having me. When we are talking about tonight supporting children when their friend is in crisis, right? And so, most of us that have children, you would expect all you have to deal with is homework, maybe your child's friend stop talking to them, just everyday challenges. And oftentimes parents are less prepared for the moments when their child comes home carrying something extremely heavy. And not only something extremely heavy, but something that doesn't even belong to them. So tonight, what I really want to do is have a conversation where we talk about what to do in that moment, if and when that moment occurs. So in this particular session tonight, we're going to learn how to listen as parents, like what that really looks like. We're going to talk about helping your child carry adult sized burdens, right? Because unfortunately, the world that we live in today, helping your child understand, what caring is, right? And what that can look like as they're supporting their friends, even from at different age groups, elementary school, middle school, high school, things of that nature. And so by the end of this, my goal is to hopefully provide you with tools and resources where you can feel more confident and less alone, right? So, as we go to the next slide and we start talking about supporting our children, right? We want to know, why does this even matter, right? I mean, here the truth of the matter is this. Children are dealing with so much, and oftentimes they know about what's going on before it gets to us. Okay, like we're the last ones to know, unfortunately, right? And sometimes when we do find out, the crisis has escalated. We usually don't find out in the beginning. And so, one of the things that happens oftentimes when when the crisis shows up is it shows up in different ways, right? Our children are finding out talking on text messages, social media. I mean, just think about all the acronyms that we don't know. I think an adult sent me an acronym via text message the other day, OAN. Do you know I had to look that up? I was like, and I didn't want to tell them, I was embarrassed. I didn't know what they were talking about. So I'm Googling what's the slang for OAN in text messages. By the way, it means on another note. Okay, just in case you didn't know. So the thing is, our children are dealing with so much, right? And not only that, when they're dealing with these things, oftentimes I think we as parents, as adults, sometimes tend to minimize our children's emotions. And our children are scared, they're confused. They have emotions oftentimes that are bigger than the language that they actually have to express what's going on inside of them. And so there's a lot going on, right? They feel maybe loyalty to their peers, all while dealing with the heaviness, right, of holding secrets. And let's not forget to add many mental health struggles. One of the things that I like to tell parents is this: our children are nothing more than miniature adults. Like they're us, and even as adults, think about how many times we have emotions and don't have the language to express it, or don't even realize or know who to go to for help. So imagine the situation or the predicament that your child may feel like they're in when that happens. So this is a very important conversation to have. And so when we go to our next slide, and we want to talk about, right, what do we want for our children? Ultimately, as parents, we want our children to be safe. Well, I'm just going to assume, maybe I shouldn't, but I'm just going to assume that most parents want their child to grow up to be healthy, happy citizens, right? To be productive, right? I mean, at the very least, right? We want the best for our children. Um, but growing up in today's society brings along a lot of heavy weights, right? And so we have to figure out ways as parents to teach our children to become compassionate without holding the responsibility of their friends' troubles, right? We want to teach them how to care without feeling like they have to control the situation. We also want to take time to teach them what support can look like and how support is not equivalent to secrecy, right? Secrecy, like secrets, they do so much damage. not only to the person holding the secret, but when you have a friend or a loved one in crisis, not expressing the care and concern in a way that brings individuals into the situation that can assist them with the problem is it just tears down, the other individual, those that are attached to the individual, family systems, communities. So we want to teach our kids that we as adults, as parents, like we're here, like we have their back, right? And that they don't have to feel responsible for carrying the weight of other problems. So as we move forward and we look at our next slide and we talk about how parents can support their children, um, there are just kind of a couple of things that I wanted to mention, right? So, overall, one of the things that I want to mention is I think it is so important that we learn how to listen without judgment. Right. Now, I know that's hard sometimes because, sometimes somebody will say something and you're like, in your head, you're like, what? But, it's really important. And it doesn't mean that you don't you can't have an opinion. It just simply means that we want to remain open, and think of it this way. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody where, you're talking to them, you're trying to express how you feel, but all they lock in on is that one word you said 5 minutes earlier in the conversation. And when you're done talking, that's the only thing they focus on. And you're like, is that all you got out of that? Is that what you came up with, in this conversation? Same thing when we're working with our children. Once again, remember, they're nothing but miniature adults. They think they're adults, but they're miniature adults, right? And so that means that they have a mind, they have thoughts, they have emotions, and so many things that they have to deal with. So listening without judgment, once again, doesn't mean you don't have an opinion. It's, to me, in my mind, it simply means that we reserve the right to we set our opinion to the side and listen with an open heart and an open mind to see what the person is trying to convey, hear what they're trying to convey to us. That's so important, right? And then you can have a dialogue because oftentimes most people just want to be heard. You can still, at the end of a situation, disagree, but if you feel like you were heard or like the person genuinely tried to understand and hear you, even if they didn't quite get it, there's something about a weight that's been slightly lifted, and then you can move on to reconciliation or problem solving, right? Same thing when you're talking to your children. They don't, most children are already afraid they're going to get in trouble about so many things. But if they know they can come to you and they're like, my parent is going to listen to me, and then we can have a conversation, that's going to mean so much, right? Doing this, what does it do? It validates their emotions, right? If they're feeling sad, if they're scared, if they're confused, if they're angry, it doesn't matter what it is. It tells them that, listen, your emotions are valid. Everything you're feeling is okay. I'm here as your parent, as the adult, to help you navigate through these emotions, right? Now, I'm using words like navigate, but when you're talking to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, they might be like, what does that mean, mommy or daddy? What does that mean? And so you have to definitely maybe use simpler language that your child can understand, right? Just kind of something that helps them to understand what the next steps are, right? You can use the word navigate with a high school child, but you may want to just use the word help, with your middle school or elementary school child. Even the word support you might need to pull out the thesaurus, or Google some synonyms, to help you explain some things, because we'll be surprised at how we use words all the time, but come up with everybody has a different meaning, right? So for that word. So using simple language, letting your child know that you're here to listen to them and help them with the process is very important, right? And so even when we talk about different age ranges, right? Like I mentioned, elementary school, middle school, things like simpler language is very important. One of the things you want to do is reassure that they're safe, right? Routine is so important. It's important for a child when there is no crisis. So imagine when there is, right? Your child is now feeling like, my world feels like it's falling apart over here. When I come home, they may not have the language for it, but they need to feel as though they're on steady ground. So, as much as possible, if there's a way to continue routines, whether they're sleeping routines, whether they're family traditions, or, how you eat meals in the home, or, the times that you wake up for school, or whatever it is, it's so important for them to have a routine. One of the other things that's so important, and I can't stress this enough, sometimes I know when things happen, and listen, I have a niece who is 10 years old, and let me tell you, this girl, there's some things that come out her mouth. In my head, I'm like, what? you know, but I have to present. She calls me Auntie Mo. So I have to present. And she's like, Auntie Mo, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh Lord, I don't know what to do. But in my I have on my poker face, right? And I'm like, okay, Madison, okay. So tell me more. Okay. But in my head, I am screaming, what am I gonna say to this child, right? They need to see that we are calm, right? And sometimes the truth is it takes practice for us as adults, right? Because not only if you're raising a child, do you have to raise that child, you have to deal with other life issues. And you may have had a bad day at work. You may, if you don't, if you work at home, you may just everything may have just been going wrong. um you may be sick. There's so many things. You may not feel like cooking even though you feel fine, and everybody's like, what's for dinner? I don't know, get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So remaining calm is important, because the children respond based on how we respond. It's kind of like the child that falls on the ground and then looks around to see how you're going to respond. Like, are you going to be the frantic parent that go, oh my God? And and so then if you are like that, then they're like, oh, and all the tears start coming. But if you're not, they're, most of the time they're like, okay, you're like, oh, okay, get up and play. And they get up and play. So remaining calm, like these are just a few ways to kind of support your child. So now let's go to the next slide and talk about what kids can do for their friends, right? And this can be for everybody. Once again, the goal as a parent is to try to remove the weight and the heaviness of the crisis off your child, right? And teach them how to be caring and compassionate without taking on everyone's load. And that's a hard thing. That's a hard, even as an adult, that can be a hard thing. So some things you can kind of tell or talk to your child about is they can, just check in with their friend. Everybody has cell phones, or if they're in classrooms, just see how you're doing. How you doing today? Just basic check-ins, letting letting the child know that sometimes just your presence is is what's needed. Like, sometimes we minimize just being, right? And we don't always have to fix, 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 fix. Sometimes as parents, we want to fix this and fix that. And so then we teach our children, you need to fix this and fix that. But sometimes in situations like this, just checking in, telling your child, check in with your friends, see how they're doing, you know, offering things like connection versus like resolution and solutions to everything, right? How you doing? Do you want to go grab, well, they can't grab coffee, but you want you want some hot, you want to sit at the same table at lunch and drink hot chocolate, I don't know, right? So connection is so important, because when someone is going through a crisis, they can feel any range of emotions. Sometimes those emotions include feeling sad. Sometimes they include feeling lonely. Sometimes they include feeling angry. And there might be moments where they are happy about something, but then quickly transition into feeling guilt about being happy. There are just so many things that someone may experience emotion wise. And so that connection is oftentimes more valuable than we give it credit for. Um, I was going to say dates, not date, but what do you call play dates? Play dates. Maybe seeing if you can have some play dates. They can have some play dates with their friends. Watching movies. Things of that nature. I think it's just so important to focus on the connection piece and not necessarily trying to always find answers. And I know that's hard, because we as humans, like, if you're like me, like, I need to know, right? I may act like I don't need to know sometimes, but I need to know. So, so children are the same. Like, they need and they want to know, but sometimes if we can teach them, sometimes sitting in a place where we don't know is okay if we have the right supports around us, right? So let's take it once again, like with our elementary school and middle school kids, right? What can they do? Elementary school, maybe sitting together, like I mentioned, playing together. When you get older and you have phones, they can text and they're sitting at lunch together. And then you have the high school, maybe student age range, where they can have maybe more consistent check-ins, right? Because they're beginning to become a little bit more autonomous and they can do a little bit more. And you kind of want to be careful as they get older, because you don't want to intrude. You kind of want to figure out how to teach them how to lead as you begin to let go a little bit while you're still remaining supportive. I know parents, there's just so much to it, right? Like the job is never done. But we just kind of went over some things about what kids can do. Let's go ahead and look at what kids can't, should kind of watch out for, right? We mentioned the fixing problems. Secrets. We mentioned keeping secrets, right? We want to make sure that they don't feel like they have to be the adult in a situation, right? We want to make sure that they don't sacrifice their own well-being for anything, for the situation. And so when we as parents look at different problems that require help, adult help, what are some of the things we think about? right? Because once again, we're talking about crisis. So we've gone beyond, Susie's friend is not talking to her anymore, or I got a C on my homework on my test and I really wanted an A, right? We're talking things like safety concerns. We're talking about things like self-harm, right? Things about harming others, abuse, neglect, bullying, right? Whether it's in person or online. Let's not forget things like trauma and loss, right? Oftentimes those things have a way of seeping in, and just because we're so used to loss now, sometimes, we have to be careful that we don't minimize it, to a point where it doesn't, we don't take it as seriously as we should. So when we look at problems that require adult help, these are some of the things to kind of think about, right? Um, think about when you were a child, right? Now, like those problems are 10x, right? 20x. So if any of these things come up, if you see if you hear your child talking about their friend is experiencing like extreme emotional distress, maybe constantly crying, or like all of these things are very helpful, to kind of keep in the back of your mind, when you're thinking about problems that you as an adult parent might want to consider stepping into to offer some support and assistance. So as we go to the next slide, let's talk about warning signs, right? What are some of the warning signs in that friend? So if your child comes to you and says that their friend is saying things like they just want to disappear, or they just don't want to do this anymore, and the do this is very vague, right? They're not talking about, I don't want to do this homework anymore. No, they're just like, I just don't want to do this anymore, right? Or your child comes home saying things like, their friend doesn't like going home. They always ask to come over to your house, like they don't ever want to go home. Or if the friend seems like they're always isolating and withdrawing. Like these are some things that if you hear your child saying this is what's happening with a friend, or even if you hear or see this happening in the child's friend yourself, these are red flags. These are not green flags. These are not yellow flags. These are red flags, right? And we need to take the red flags seriously. Are we seeing mood shifts? Behavioral shifts? Like, is there a significant change in behavior, right? All of a sudden, is someone more volatile? Is someone more angry? Is someone more is someone isolating more? Is someone a lot more reserved and quiet? Like all of a sudden, these are things that we have to really think about. And once again, when we're talking about age range, when we talk about high school students, we have to also remember they have tremendous access to so many more things. So, looking at online posts, right? Jokes about things that really aren't joke worthy, like jokes about death, or, things of that nature. Oftentimes, people or students or young people will joke about some things. And we as adults are cringing, or we as adults are minimizing it, saying, oh, they're always talking about that, right? That's just the kids these days. These are red flags. So if you hear your children saying this is what's happening with their friends, or if you see this happening in your child's friends, please, please, please know that your wisdom, your assistance in the matter is greatly needed, so you would not be wrong for stepping in. But now let's talk about warning signs in your child as we go to the next slide. So in your child, if you see any anxiety, oh, I went too soon, sorry, but that's okay, we can leave it there. In your child, if we see any anxiety, in sadness increased, it's okay. If we see any anxiety or sadness increased in the child, is your child emotionally exhausted? Right? Like, does your child normally have energy and all of a sudden your child is exhausted? What's going on? Right? Is your child all of a sudden having trouble sleeping or focusing? These things matter. What are you seeing? Do you feel as though your child feels responsible for their friend's safety? Right? All of these, once again, are warning signs. They are telltale signs that you are needed as the adult, as the parent, to step in and help out, right? Oftentimes, children are afraid to talk to adults. They're afraid to talk to adults because they're afraid of getting in trouble. Um, and then the older kids get, they just don't want us in their business anyway. you know um and I mean, sometimes, once again, when we think about us as adults, think about how oftentimes as adults we want to keep our business to ourselves. They're nothing more than miniature adults, right? Mini me's. And so just helping them, which is why it's important to learn how to listen and have conversation with them, in a way that won't be judgmental. So now, as we go to the next slide, let's talk about the language to listen for. So when you hear your child say things like, listen, I promised I wouldn't tell, or if I say something, it'll make it worse because then you're gonna go to the school and you're gonna, like they like have all these problems. Yes, I am gonna go to the school, but I'm not gonna say that right away. You're not gonna say that right away like that, right? You're gonna lead up to that because you know what's best, right? Your child might be thinking, I'm the only one that my friend trusts. And if I break my friend's trust, they won't be my friend anymore. I'm going to feel bad. Or if I break their trust, they're actually going to do what they said they were going to do. They just become afraid. And these are natural, normal responses. Right? This is nothing abnormal. The feelings and these type of responses that you hear, while they're red flags in the sense that you do need to step in, they're not red flags in the sense that something's wrong with your child, right? Like, they are normal. These are normal responses. One of the things you want to help them do as the parent is reframe their thinking, right? Help them understand that secrecy does not equal loyalty. Right? Think about how many things we've kept secret, or you might have heard somebody else keep secret, or we've watched so many movies and somebody kept something a secret and it ended up being worse and they should have just told in the beginning, right? Giving them analogies is so important. Helping them understand that safety is more important than a promise to keep a secret. Safety is love. It doesn't feel like it all the time, but the way you show your care, concern, and compassion for your friend is to do your best to help them stay safe, right? And sometimes staying safe doesn't always feel good. If I'm walking across the street with my niece and a car is coming and she doesn't see it, and I yank her back, she's going to be like, Auntie Mo, why'd you do that? Because I was saving your life, right? Safety doesn't always feel good, but it is more important, right, than trying to keep a promise of secrecy. So, how can we as parents talk to our children? When we look at our when we talk to our children, some of the things that we want to let them know is, we want to validate, and affirm that, thank you for telling me, right? I'm here to support you. This is too big for you to handle alone. And sometimes giving them, um, sometimes being transparent, within reason is helpful. Listen, your parents, like, we can't always do everything by ourselves. We need help too. And so everybody needs help sometimes. Framing it so that they see that there are times that even though you, as their parent, are there to support, and you provide a steady, hopefully stable lifestyle, to the best of your ability for them, helping them to see that even then you sometimes need help, right? Like, just like, I may not be able to take you to school all the time. I need help. And that's why the school, allows us to use the school buses so that they can take you to school while I go to work. And then sometimes, and just giving them an understanding of what the big picture looks like within their mind is sometimes very helpful. Staying calm and confident, even when you're freaking out. you know, calm is and this is a little sidebar. I know, I've always wanted to be a hostage negotiator. And so I have. So there's a part of me, I think, that does try to remain calm in chaos, because you have to be calm when you're talking to these terrorists, right? Well, sometimes, but anyway, that was a sidebar. Don't mind me with that. But when you're talking to your child, staying calm and remaining as poised as possible is just key. Your child is going to take your cues from you. There's a saying that says, more is caught than taught. More is caught than taught, which means that your child will catch more of what you do, how you behave, latch on to the emotions that you exude or emote in certain situations. They'll really learn and really model those behaviors more than the actual words that you tell them, right? So how you present means more than anything. And it's important, even in all of this, while we're talking about how you as a parent can assist your child, don't forget to get help for yourself. That is so important. You are valuable too. And just, mirroring, the fact that you need help, and don't minimize what you need, and don't feel like you have to be the savior, because what's happening oftentimes is you're probably trying to swoop in and save your child, and also swoop in and fix the situation to with the friend, and we fail to understand that really it does take a village. It takes a village to raise children. So just like you're trying to help your child navigate, don't feel like you have to do it alone either, right? And so, final takeaways. Let's just grab, as a final takeaway, I just want to reiterate um, that we want our kids to be compassionate, right? So so we want our kids to be compassionate. We don't want them to feel overwhelmed. We want to teach them how to set healthy boundaries, right? What does setting healthy boundaries look like so that I learn how to take care of myself even while I'm trying to help my friend get through a situation, right? Um, we want to make sure that we ask for help when needed, even as the parent. It's so important. And you as the parent, like, you're the role model. And I know it's a lot of responsibility. It's a heavy responsibility, which is why you can't do it alone yourself either, right? And so, just like you help take care of your kids and help them navigate the crisis, when they're in that crisis, you're in it with them. Make sure you have your support systems as well, because it's so meaningful and it means so much. So, I really hope that this presentation on supporting your child or your children while they're navigating the crisis of a friend, was really, really helpful and supportive, and provided you with some tools and tips and techniques that you can use should a crisis ever come up. Thank you.
Fantastic, Monifa. That was so good. So good. Oh my gosh. Julie, do you want to so now we usually just start a dialogue. We just have a conversation with some
Yeah,
questions. So do you want to start, Julie? And
sure. Um,
that
I
was
have
so good.
one swirling in my brain, but I think what I'll start with is like, what would you suggest for parents to help get their kid to open up and not shut down? What kind of things should they say? You see, you have a student, a kid that's really struggling. They're struggling, but they don't want to share. Because they don't want to give away. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I think that it's important to it probably depends on the age range. Let's start
Yeah.
there. But I think it's important maybe to just kind of talk to the child and just ask them, just what they might be worried about, or what's the worst case scenario. Um, Instead of even putting it on them, ask the question in a way that frames it where, it's like, well, what do you think I might do? Or, instead of, what mistake do you think I might make if I were to step in? And then they might start talking, well, you mom or you dad, you like, how you do, you start going off and you start making phone calls and this, that, and the other, and so maybe changing the focus a little bit. And instead of directing the question to them, having them dig into their emotions, their feelings, asking questions that seem like you're trying to come through the back door, we're trying to figure out what's happening, which is what we're doing,
Right.
kind of ask them questions that just take the focus off a little bit. Maybe even tell it in a story like
Mm.
fashion. Is there a story that you can tell? They might be like, "Oh, here we go again," but you know, is there a story you can tell that helps them to equate their situation to that, right? Is there a show or a movie you watched,
Mm.
you know, um, that you can kind of say, remember when we watched that movie and the character did X, Y, and Z? That kind of and start talking about things in a way that don't necessarily shine the light directly on them.
Mm.
That might be one way to look at it.
Thank you.
That's great. I so loved the takeaways, those four takeaways. I feel like those are such wisdom for all of us and all of, all parents and all kids, and I appreciated that. And the also really appreciated when you were talking in the beginning about language, how to make language more accessible for younger kids. And I appreciated you even saying the word support. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Like that's a vague word for younger kids. So thank you for that. That was a good reminder for me. My question is, which you talked a little bit about, but like the question about balancing being supportive with I guess the question is like the relationship with that other child's family or that other child's parent, like how to think about, and I know it's like situation dependent, but when might be the time to sort of reach out to that other kid's parent if that's the circumstance, or when that might be overstepping, and how to think about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is tricky, right? Because oftentimes parents are very sensitive, and protective
Yeah,
of their children in the most loving way.
yeah,
But sometimes, our protection might come off, a little strong from another person's perspective.
yeah.
And so one of the things, one of the things I actually think is pretty good is not necessarily. I think it's important to bring a balance to the conversation,
Mm.
right? So when I talk about bringing balance to the conversation, if you have to have a conversation with another parent, sometimes that might mean, let's say I'm just going to use my niece all night long, right? So let's say my niece, everybody has something, an area that they need to work on, right? So I might say, Madison, she can, be a little intense sometimes. She's very, she has this logical thinking. And so she's type A and she needs things done a certain way. She's a rule follower. And so, sometimes things that aren't necessarily that big of a deal become a bigger deal. And I can see how she may have done X, Y, and Z.
Mm,
And I noticed that when they were in conversation, that although I saw her do that, I was just wondering what might be the best way to, when they're on their play date, for me to, talk to your child or bring up a situation, to you if
mhm,
something were to happen,
mm.
right? So it's not necessarily like putting your child on Front Street telling all their
Right,
business, but
right.
sometimes when people feel like, um, you can acknowledge some vulnerability within yourself or your child,
Yeah,
it softens the blow when
yeah,
you then acknowledge a vulnerability in their
yeah.
child. Does
That
that
makes
does
a
that
lot.
kind of
Yeah,
help?
that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. And it makes me think about like if I was on the receiving end, right? And what you're
Yeah.
describing would make me feel so much more open than just like coming in with that. I think I would be one of those parents that's like, I got it, Um, but yeah, hearing that would make me feel a lot more, yeah, like at ease, less potentially judged, just yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So my question is about the kid and like how do you help them with the language for having boundaries with a friend who's in crisis? Especially when they're afraid of losing that friendship because you want your kid to have healthy boundaries. How do you teach them that? How do you work with them on that and the language around it?
Yeah, that's a good one, Julie. So the language, sometimes when I talk to individuals and we're talking about language, sometimes what you can do is listen to their language, use the words they're using,
Mhm.
and then begin to expand from there. Because even if they have the definition wrong, you're at least in the same chapter of the book that they're
Mm.
reading, so to speak,
Mhm.
right? And you can ask them, so what does that mean to you? Or um, we can even use the word help. Very simple. Someone in elementary school or middle school would understand help. But
Mhm.
now we need to talk about what help looks like, what help is, and what help isn't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And sometimes when we're talking about language around emotional problems, it might be helpful if you can give an example that's physical and tangible.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about someone not feeling well emotionally, right? Well, maybe give them an example. Remember when you fell on the playground and you broke your arm and how
Mhm.
hard that, how much
Mhm.
that hurt? Like sometimes, you just feel that bad on the inside, right?
Mhm.
And even though it hurt for a long time, and we went to the doctor and he gave medicine and put a cast on it, you know, eventually it began to feel better. But we had to go to the doctor, even though we were crying and didn't want to because we were scared, right? Like putting something tangible that they can identify with and then comparing it to the emotional and mental piece might be a way to bridge that gap with language.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love how you like made it user friendly for younger kids too,
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
really challenging.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
actually got a email just I think today from one of the Bright staff on the national team that was saying was just sort of asking for more just content around parents of younger kids. So I feel like this has been really helpful today with these examples of elementary and younger kids. Um, so question here, I have a question around um, the question is around how do we check in when with our child regularly without having them feel interrogated? And is there something that we might say in advance, like in the beginning, to let them know or something that we're going to be checking in a lot because it's a hard time or something?
So sometimes it's a matter of having the conversation and saying, I know this is a tough time. And then sometimes when times are tough, sometimes you want to talk and sometimes you don't. I'm going to want to check on you because I'm your parent. I love you. I'm going to want to make sure you're okay. So let's come up with some type of game plan. Like, how are we going to work this out? How can we work it out so we can meet in the middle? The middle being I'm allowed to check in and but not to the point where I overstep boundaries and you're feeling like, oh, if you ask me how I'm feeling one more time, that you're
Like, I'm
just
fine.
frustrated.
Yeah.
Yes. But sometimes it's really just a matter of saying, let's have a conversation about what check-ins look like because
Mm,
I do want to check in on you and I am going to check on you because I love you and I care about you.
yeah.
You know, and I don't want my check-ins to be frustrating.
Yeah.
So, is it okay, is it okay to have regular check-ins and maybe regular means daily?
Mm,
But just saying, you good,
yeah.
thumbs
Yeah.
up. Are we gonna have like a sign, thumbs up, thumbs
Yes.
down?
Yeah. I love that.
Like, maybe something kind of fun or cool or what have you. Maybe the check-in is an open-ended question.
Hmm.
Sometimes we ask questions that require a yes or no answer. And even when you ask an open ended question, that teenager,
Yeah.
i.e., my nephew, will
Yeah.
still find a way to answer yes or no. And
With
you're
one
like,
word.
wait a
Yeah.
minute, no. I asked the question in a way that required a longer response.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
but sometimes asking a question, yeah, sometimes asking a question that's open ended is very important. But here's the key: think about what you really want to know as the parent.
Yeah.
Think about the fact that your child is not going to want to answer 20,000 questions.
Yeah.
They barely want to answer the one that you're going to
Yeah.
ask, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you really want to know at that moment?
Yeah.
Do you really just want to know how their day was so they can say fine? Or do you really want to know, did you talk to so and so today? What did they
Yeah.
say? And even if you say, did you talk to so and so today? Like, do you really just want to know, did they talk to them? Or do you want to know what they talked about?
Mm.
Right? think about what you really want to know at the core.
Yeah.
Center your open-ended question around that.
Yeah.
That way you get as much information right off the bat as possible, even if you only ask one question.
I love that. Making it the important question and not just, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I like that.
And try
So
to avoid like constant follow-ups, you
Yes.
know.
And I think that's, it's really helping me how you talked about just the calm and, and the what did you say, the caught not taught. Because I think, when
yeah,
I look back, I think of the times that I started those conversations when my anxiety was too high. And had I waited even 5 minutes or even better,
Yeah,
an hour,
yeah.
those conversations, I think I would have been able to prioritize the question that I really, but I think, yeah, that it's so natural that when as parents, we have that anxiety, we want to just fix, fix, fix instead of that listening that you're talking about. And yeah, yeah,
oh, thank you, Manifa. I just really appreciate like tonight's reminder that we want our kids to be caring friends, but not to feel overburdened with adult-sized problems.
yeah,
Um, and sometimes situations are just too big for kids to handle. And um, being, sharing that with an adult is not a betrayal of your friend. It's actually the right thing to do. And
yeah,
that, especially our role as parents, I think sometimes we're a little unaware, is to make sure our kids know they can come to us. And that's an ongoing thing, right? Like
mhm.
you can tell me the truth. I'm not going to freak out. And that also resides in me as a
Yeah,
person, like what you're just talking about, Megan, is like how
yes.
I show up. And I
How do I not
really
freak
do.
out? Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back, how many times could I have fixed that? But I really do like your phrase. That was I wrote that down. I'll have to read it. More is caught than taught. And
yeah,
I think that's the big takeaway is remembering that we model more than we teach, like verbally
yeah,
teach. But thank you for just like this grounded, clear practice of helping your kids navigate these really hard situations. I appreciate that.
yes,
For our listeners, we at Bryt have every month during the school year, on the first Tuesday of the month, we have a parent learning session. You can go to brightfamilyengagement.org/25-26 to look at our offerings. Um, Next month, I cannot remember what our thing is, and that's not really good. Oh, how to support my introverted child. So that's next month. I just saw that. And then on the second Tuesday of the month, we do a parent conversation group. It is open to anyone. It's open-ended. Bring your sticky situations, your tough situations, and we can all talk it through together. My colleagues, Lakeisha and Victor, will also be there, and we welcome people there. And then the fourth Tuesday of the month is our BIPOC affinity group. And same situation, Lakeisha and Victor will be covering that group as well. So thank you, everyone. We
yes.
appreciate you. Thank you, Manifa, for coming
Thank you so
tonight.
much, Monifa.